Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to class. Today we are going to talk about mother tongue. Mother tongue refers to the first language that we learn in our early childhood. There are lots of terms and people refer to the first language with different name like native language, mother tongue, natal language, parent language. In some societies we call it vernacular. So lots of different terminologies are used for this term. But mother tongue is the first language that we acquire in our early childhood. So when we say first language or mother tongue, we have a lot of debates on the designation. Which language should be referred to as mother tongue? Specifically, in the returns of the census report, we have a lot of designations assigned to particular languages, and sometimes the choice of returning a language in the database in census survey has other socio-political factors. So today we are going to talk about mother tongue vis-a-vis the Census of India Languages 2011. So what is a mother tongue? Right? It is the first language which you learn when you start learning, when you come to the world and start learning. It is named as mother tongue because mother is the immediate caregiver to the child and perhaps the first contact of the child. The first contact the child establishes is with mother. So when we say mother tongue, it has nothing to do with the biological designation because sometimes unfortunately a mother may die while giving birth to a child. So in that case, the immediate caregiver is considered as the mother of the child. It has nothing to do with the sex of the person. It can be father as well, but it is called mother tongue. It has various designations like first language, natal language, native language, parent language, or vernacular. But one thing is for sure, that we start we start our linguistic journey with our mother tongue, first language, and then by and by we may acquire more languages. You can have second language, third language, fourth language. People are polyglot who speak many languages. So the mother tongue can be identified and defined in terms of when the child gets the first input, right? If you go by behaviorist paradigm, this first stimulus. If you go by the nativist paradigm, the primary linguistic data which triggers the LAD, language acquisition device, and which triggers your universal grammar, right? It's mother tongue. It's called mother tongue. The first primary linguistic data that we receive in the early childhood when we start acquiring our first language. Now, the term, finally, we can deduct that the term mother tongue refers to a person's native language, that is a language learned from birth, also called the first language or dominant language or home language, and native tongue. So that is mother tongue. So first language that we acquire the first primary linguistic data that you receive, and you start interacting with the external world after your birth. That is your first language or mother tongue. Now, Census 2011 India is a very interesting document to look at when we talk about mother tongues. This is the latest data available. When it comes to designation or naming the mother tongue, we have a lot of emotional issues, right? Uh, Issues of identity, how you identify. So the entries in the census does not necessarily reflect the exact number of native languages or mother tongues. The reason being that the raw returns are so high in numbers. For example, more than 19,000 we have returns in 2011 census. So are they all different languages? A rough estimate says that we have approximately more than 6,000 languages in the world. So how come we have more than 19,000 languages alone in India? So this number is misnomer, confusing, and it depicts and denotes our emotional attachment to the language that we speak, how we identify, how we construct identity with these languages. If you look at the early source to quantify the total number of languages in India, Sir George Grierson produced 12 volumes of a monumental work, Linguistic Survey of India, between 1903 to 1923, span of 20 years, and he surveyed the British India, you know, and pre-independence, and he came up with a total number of 179 languages and 544 dialects. Now, the question of language and dialects are still debatable, and I repeatedly mentioned that these are designations, right? Uh, how to find difference between, what is the exact difference, linguistic difference between language and dialect is still debatable. We cannot arrive at a definite definition of it. So it's all speakers' idea towards, attitude towards the language, and others' attitude towards the other speakers' language. However, Sir George Grierson produced 12 volumes of Linguistic Survey of India in the span of 20 years, starting from 1903 to 1923. And he came up with 179 languages and 544 dialects. The 1921 census, pre-independent India, census 1921, also reports 188 languages and 49 dialects. Again, look at this variation in numbers, right? And then we had a continued process of decennial surveys in the census, and question number 10 of the census survey questionnaire takes care of the question of languages and mother tongue. So in 2011 census, as in the previous censuses, the mother tongue as returned by each individual was collected through question number 10 of household schedule, which was canvassed for the entire population of the country. And thus we arrive at some data. Now, if you look at the provisions, census does not include those languages which have less than 10,000 speakers. And the number of such languages in India with less than 10,000 speakers is very high. But they are grouped and clustered in other languages. So census does not, uh, you know, report them separately. They are clustered and clubbed as other languages. The respondents were made free to return the name of their mother tongue, and same was recorded faithfully by the enumerators. And enumerators were given a specific instruction not to be judgmental. They are given instructions anyway in each of the surveys not to be judgmental, not to correct the designations or the names returned by the respondent, not to suggest any name returned by the respondent. So, objectively and faithfully, they only record the designations or the names given by respondents to the response of question number 10 of household schedule, and these are collected as raw returns. And this raw return or recording of these designations and names by the enumerators led up to the mark of 19,569 languages or 19,569 varieties, 19,569 unique designations, labels are associated with the term called mother tongue in the 2011 census of India. These numbers are mind boggling. We cannot imagine such a huge number. The question is, why respondents respond in such a way? Is there any truth behind such a huge number, or census is not able to capture these numbers, or is it the individual's preference to associate with a particular designation? What works there? The identity issues, the collective identity issues, right? Why do they have such a wide variety, wild, numbers while returning their mother tongue in the survey? Uh, these names returned by the respondents are basically designations provided by them, and they were faithfully recorded by the enumerators. And the number that we arrive at in 2011 census is 19,569. Now, for assessing the correlation between the mother tongue and designations of the census, and for presenting the numerous raw returns in terms of their linguistic affiliations to actual languages and dialects, 9,569 raw returns were subjected to thorough linguistic scrutiny, edit, and rationalization. And after a thorough edit, linguistic scrutiny, and rationalization, the census arrived at 1,369 rationalized mother tongues and 1,474 names which were treated as unclassified and relegated to other mother tongues category. But still, we could categorize and identify 1,600, 369, 1,369 varieties as mother tongue, approximately 1,400, right? And these 1,369 rationalized mother tongues were further classified following a usual linguistic method for rational grouping based on available linguistic information. So they're again reclustered and grouped together. And thus, an inventory of classified mother tongue returned by 10,000 or more speakers. Always mind, remember that census does not record the designations or names of varieties which are spoken by less than 10,000, and 10,000 is a huge number. There is a lot of debate why this 10,000 number. So what happens to the minor languages, right, which have little number of speakers? UNESCO says that there are 197 languages endangered in India, and definitely when they are endangered, we do not have 10,000 speakers for them. So what happens to them? How do we account for them? Do we count them? And almost like 1400 languages are relegated to clustered in other mother tongues category. What happens to those languages? How do we count them? How do we account for them? But in the census 2011, we rationalized, regrouped and reclustered these 1369 languages which have more than 10,000 speakers. And the final presentation of 2011 census comes up with a total number of languages to 121. So imagine we started from 19,569, reached to 1369, and finally the census declares 121 languages in India. So this is the number that census gives us. But the question still remains unanswered. What about those those independent designations and names people returned in the raw returns as their mother tongue? Other sources, if you look at, like People's Language Survey of India, Linguistic Survey of India, carried out between 2010 and 2013, identifies 780 languages. Yet another source, very reliable source, Ethnologue, which is a global database, it says in its 2019 report that there are 553 living languages in India out of 7,111 languages in the world. So now these numbers are quite confusing. Census of India declares 121 languages. People's Survey of India, Linguistic Survey of India declares 780 languages. The World Database on Languages, Ethnologue, declares in its 2019 report 453 languages. Right? This is amazing, because this discussion continues. The way we collect data in the census, the rationale behind projecting the number of languages spoken, the methodology chosen for clustering, regrouping these languages according to their linguistic affiliations, and the aspirations of the respondents who return their mother tongue with different designations that goes up to 19,569 according to census 2011 itself. So the question of mother tongue is a very sensitive issue, and it's not easy to arrive at the exact number of mother tongues, exact number of languages spoken by different people. Census does not include languages spoken less than 10,000, and the language experts, linguists and scholars debate this issue of 10,000 number. So what is the rationale behind counting only those languages, clustering only those languages, grouping only those languages which have more than 10,000 speakers. So, what happens to endangered languages? What happens to languages which are on the verge of extinction? Or what happens to the languages which have less than 10,000 speakers, minor languages not mentioned separately in the census? How to account for 19,569 returns, right? And you can understand the socio-political implications of it, right? And that's why this data is interesting, as I told you in the beginning. The question of mother tongue is very emotional. We associate with the world, we start constructing the knowledge of the world in our first language. We dream, we feel, we think in our first language, in our mother tongue. Now, the question is again problematic because in the new education policy, we are promoting mother tongue education. Now, how to arrive at the exact number of mother tongues in which we require to produce study material, train our teachers, prepare, reference materials, dictionaries, textbooks. What rationale do we have for that, right? Uh, because when you talk to speakers of you know um, particular language, they have a different idea and emotion associated with it. Go to this William Lebow's popular and a very famous study of Martha Vineyard Island, which saw almost 40,000 visitors every summer from outside who are outside the island. So they're not islanders. And we find a deliberate attempt to create a distinction between the groups of two speakers. So they had centralized diphthongs, the islanders, to sound different, to identify with the community, to create a cohesive community, identify with the internal members of the group, and distinguish from external visitors. So the question of mother tongue or the is a very serious one, sensitive one, emotional one, and because it's our first language, right? We identify with it. Now, interesting cases are there. When you look at, for example, in the census data, the issue of Sanskrit, you suddenly find a jump in the numbers and multiple jump in the numbers. So while returning Sanskrit as a mother tongue, right, uh, the other socio-political factors work, right? You can see the decennial growth or which is either positive or negative in many cases of many languages. How people identify with particular language. There are other political regions, social regions, identity issues which trigger such migrations, which trigger such naming because they want to identify with a dominant language. If you look at the grouping, for example, in Hindi, Hindi, we have more than 40 languages grouped under Hindi, right? So people claim Hindi as their mother tongue, but it includes Maghi, it includes Bhojpuri, it includes Angika, it includes Bajika, it includes Bundeli, it includes Awadhi, it includes Braj. So, do we consider them uh, a separate language, or do you consider them part of or the package of Hindi as a dominant language. And this happens with many other languages, all languages perhaps, because the census groups all these languages in some language or the other. Like Tamil, some languages are grouped under it. Telugu, some languages are grouped under it, right? Marathi, some languages are grouped under it. So the languages which are grouped under these dominant labels or names, do we consider them separate languages or are they simply dialects of this language? Bhojpuri is Bhojpuri dialect of Hindi? Is Maghi dialect of Hindi? Is Bajika dialect of Hindi? Is Braj dialect of Hindi? Is Avadhi dialect of Hindi? Is Bundeli dialect of Hindi? So do we have Hindi as a universal label for all these languages? Are they separate, different, or are they the same? And they are grouped under Hindi. So these are some questions which are debated in academia, and others as scholars differ with their views. But people do return in the census survey Hindi as their mother tongue, right? So they speak Braj. Braj is their household language. They speak Avadhi, which is their native language, first language. They speak Bundeli, which is their first language. They speak Maghi, which is their first language. But they return Hindi as their mother tongue. And these languages are grouped under Hindi. In some other class, we'll talk about scheduled and non-scheduled languages. And there also we'll talk about these groupings and clusterings and techniques used in census survey. But one thing that we need to remember is the question of mother tongue is debatable, and the number that we arrive for mother tongue is again the technique and the methods is debatable. This idea of 10,000 speakers, the condition of this 10,000 speakers for being included in the census survey as a separate language or separate dialect is again questionable and debatable. Then different sources and database arrive at different numbers of languages in this country, different number of dialects in this country. As I mentioned, 121, that Census of India says 121 languages in the country, out of which 22 languages are scheduled and scheduled languages, and 99 languages are non-scheduled languages, right? Similarly, People's Linguistic Survey of India arrives at 780 languages. The Ethnologue database arrives at 453 living languages. Census 1921 pre-independence census says 180 languages and 44 dialects. M.A. Grierson's survey, right, Linguistic Survey of India, done over a period of 20 years with 12 volumes produced, claims some other number. So this is puzzling, and this is also interesting to see the emotional attachment, the sensitivity associated with this phenomenon called mother tongue, how we identify, and the most important thing is that 19,569 returns, raw returns, tell you a very complicated story of linguistic harmony and tension in the country. So with this, we will talk about linguistic diversity of India in the other class, and in some other class also we'll talk about scheduled and non-scheduled languages of India. So this is for now. Thank you very much.